Hello, and welcome to Annette on Life, Liberty, and Happiness, a podcast where I talk about the Constitution, politics, history, the culture, and pretty much anything else I want to talk about. And this podcast can be found on AnnetteTalks.com, iTunes, Stitcher, Spotify, hopefully iHeartRadio by now, and YouTube. And if you want to see what this podcast looks like, go to YouTube because I film all of my episodes as well as just recording them. And today I'm actually using a whiteboard. So if you don't usually watch YouTube, you might want to. I'm going to try really hard not to do anything that can't translate to just the spoken language. But this is take 3 because I keep forgetting to do that. I'm used to teaching in front of a class and using whiteboard, and I'm not used to just doing audio. So, I keep messing up. Anyway, so I wanted to talk about what I want to do with my podcast today. I've been thinking a lot about this lately because unless you're listening to this 30 years from now or you've been living in a cave, then you know that we live in some pretty interesting times with the pandemic and government shutdowns, churches being shut down, our temples being shut down. It's a really interesting time. And so I wanted to talk about what I think are the most important 3 things that we need to be doing during the last days. And I've got them written on the whiteboard, but I'm going to go through all of those. And the reason I'm thinking along these lines is because I spend a lot of time on Facebook. And those of you that know me know I'm a bit of a Facebook addict. And I've been seeing sort of a pattern. Ever since our founding, the country has been sort of split in 2. There's always been 2 parties, and there's been, of course, right now we have Republicans and Democrats. But I also see on Facebook, people tend to fall into 2 camps outside of politics. Although it could be argued that you see some similarities between these, but I'm not going to go into that. Anyway, you have on one hand, people who are very energetic, shall we say, about the pandemic and about social distancing and about how high the numbers are and how we all need to be doing our part and sort of being okay with the shutdowns, being okay with government mandating us where we can shop or we can't shop, things like that. And then you have, on the other hand, people who are saying, hey, look, wait a minute. I don't know that this pandemic is as bad as it's being made out to be. I don't necessarily trust the government. And the shutdowns are going overboard. And we're going to see a lot of economic problems down the road. People are losing jobs, losing small businesses, all sorts of things. And we're losing our freedoms at the same time. And so you have these disputes going on Facebook where people from the I don't trust government and I don't like what's happening camp debating with the just do whatever it takes to keep everybody alive camp. And so I'm seeing a lot of that. I call them social distance police and virus deniers. Even though the people that are saying government's going too far are not denying it. But that's what the social distance police are kind of accusing them of. So it's just easier for me to keep them in those 2 camps. And kind of like with the 2 parties, there's actually more overlap than people see. If you really drill down into it, I had a Venn diagram on one of my posts that showed, the one side saying there's a lot of deaths, and then the other side, one circle saying that, there's a lot of deaths and we need to social distance or whatever. And the other side saying the government's going too far. We're losing our freedoms. I'm worried about the economy. And then in the middle, in a Venn diagram, you have the overlap of the 2 circles saying, I believe that this pandemic is real and I'm also concerned. So I think there are a lot of us that fall in the middle there. And so I think just like Democrats and Republicans, there's usually some overlap. So I refuse to believe that we have to fall into one of these 2 camps. I think we need to stop buying into a sort of false dichotomy and try and strive for a little bit more unity. But anyway, I tend to fall into the more, if you know me at all, you already know, I tend to fall into the more, hey, let's question what the government's doing here, because we need to take a bird's eye view of the situation and not get mired down into the front lines. I mean, I've seen too many videos now of people that are working on the front lines or people who have had loved ones who are sick, and they put out these really emotional videos. Yes, I know it's happening. Of course it is. I know people that have the virus. I don't know anyone personally who's been hospitalized with the virus or who has died from the virus. And those are really separate from people who have the virus. People are going to get the virus. I believe I've already had the virus, but people are going to get the virus, and something like 98 to 99% of the people are not going to die from the virus. So, but anyway, I don't think we need to fall into a false dichotomy and think that you have to be one way or the other. The other thing that disturbs me about this, though, is that governments are encouraging citizens to tattle on each other. And so that's why I tend to think social distance police are the ones that are willing to like call 911 and say, because this was happening down in Colorado Springs. People are calling 911 and saying, my neighbor just went outside. Like we're all supposed to not leave the house for any reason, which is just not true. And so I do not like that. To me, that's too World War II Germany, or East Germany or Soviet Union. I'm old enough to remember Soviet Union and all these. That's the way the government kept the people in line. You never knew who was going to tell on you. Your neighbors, not police finding you, but the neighbors telling on you. That's not American. That's totally un-American, and I hate that. So anyway, we live in a very confusing, uncertain time. And so I think we need to have some kind of a roadmap as members of the church or just believing Christians of what we need to be doing in these last days. So I have been focusing on two of these things, but it occurred to me this morning around 5 a.m. that I need to be focusing on all three. And that's why I woke up early, and now you see me dressed in my quarantine clothing. So I believe that in the last days, that the first thing we need to be doing, the most important thing we need to be doing is living the gospel. And this is something that we should have been doing all along anyway. But if we haven't been doing it well enough, this is the time to really get going. And I mean, obviously, number one is for your personal salvation and your happiness, because men are that they might have joy. So yes, we should be doing that. But the other reason is that living the gospel is the only way we're going to receive personal revelation. And President Nelson talked about in the October of 2019 conference about how we need personal revelation now more than ever. And in this last conference, I saw a real overarching theme of receiving revelation. So obviously, if we're in the last days and we have so much confusion, so much misinformation, or just information out there. I mean, I could literally go online right now and get lost in conspiracy theories for like days if I wanted to on why this is happening. Did China send it over? Or are the Democrats doing this because they want to tank the economy so that Trump doesn't get reelected? I mean, there are so many things that some might be true, some might not be true. I don't know. But I know I can't get mired down in that. But what I do need to know is what is it that I need to know? And so when I'm reading and pondering and trying to figure out what's going on, I can ask the Spirit to tell me what are the things that are important and what are the things that I can let go of. Because I first and foremost want to know what's important for me and my family. And I don't want to get distracted or discouraged or waste a whole lot of time on what I do not need to know. So that's huge. And then I also need to know, what do I need to be doing as a citizen to protect my religious liberties? And so I also need to know what is it I need to be doing to prepare, because I think that this is not it. These are not like last days. I think we're probably in last years, maybe last decades. I don't know. But I do think that this pandemic is going to be contained. This is what we fasted about on yesterday, Good Friday. I believe it will be contained, and I believe we'll get to some sense of normalcy again. We're never going to be 100% the way we were before. For one thing, the economy is not going to get off without some injury because of the jobs that have been lost, the businesses that have closed, and the huge amounts of debt and quantitative easing that have been going on with the bills that are passing through Congress. The one that already passed, $2 trillion, the biggest bill ever in the history of our country, that's going to have an effect. So it's never going to be completely normal again, and we're always going to remember that we were in shutdown, and there's always going to be that little idea in the back of our mind that this could happen again. So I don't think we're ever going to be 100% the way we were before. But we will get to some sense of normalcy again. We will get back to being able to go about our day, doing our thing, going back to church again, everyone going back to work again. Hopefully everyone will get a job again. My kids can go back to school again. That's what I really need. But we'll get back to some sense of normalcy again. And we need to know what we need to do going forward. I think this was a warning to us to, first of all, make sure that we are living the gospel, that we are spiritually prepared and receiving regular personal revelation, because we need it. We need it right now. We need it all the time, but we really need it in the last days. And to make sure that we are physically prepared. Do we have food storage? If you didn't have it before this, you better get it now, because they could close down the stores. I never thought that's why we would need it, but I have heard that there are rumors that some states want to say you're not going to go to the store for 2 weeks. How many of you can go without going to the store for 2 weeks? You should be able to do that by now. But if not, you need to work on that. And then having savings, because again, lots of people have lost their job. And so this is a real good wake-up call to those of us who are not wholly prepared. I'm doing some work of my own to make sure I'm prepared for something like this to happen again. It's probably not going to be the same thing, but something similar could very well happen. All right, so living the gospel. Huge. That's the number one thing that we need to be doing. The other thing that we need to be doing, because we are in last days, and we know that we are mandated to gather Israel, both on this side of the veil, on the other side of the veil. That's something that they have been harping on this for forever. Since the beginning of the church. But we know that the gospel has got to sound in every ear before the second coming. So we have got to gather Israel. And obviously the building of more temples and the announcement of more temples tells us that we have got to gather Israel on the other side of the veil. And I know we can't go to the temple right now, but it won't be long before we can go back. And in the meantime, we can be doing our family history work online and gathering names so that when the temples are open again, we can rush over and inundate them. I can't wait to get back. I am never going to take for granted again being able to go to the temple and being able to just go to church. Not to mention restaurants, libraries, movie theaters, having kids in school. I'm homeschooling my kids right now, and it's not a good time. I always said I would never homeschool my kids. I never thought I would be forced into it. But they are learning the Constitution, I'll tell you that right now. Anyway, so there are a couple of positives to this pandemic and being stuck at home. Number one, with living the gospel, we have more time at home to study our scriptures and be praying more, studying together as a family, and pondering on the things that we need to be pondering on. I felt inspired when this first came down to continue teaching my gospel doctrine class, because that's my calling, but to do it online. And so every Sunday on Facebook, on my page, which is Annette Mashler Bybee, if you want to find me, I make it public. I do an unofficial gospel doctrine class on Facebook Live. And so it's really forced me to get into the scriptures. And what I've done is gone out and bought this Book of Mormon study guide by Valletta. You can get it at Deseret Book. I'm assuming you could still order it online right now. I doubt that the store is open. But I have gotten, since I'm doing this weekly and in front of a much bigger audience, I spend so much more time in the scriptures now than I did before. That's been a real boon to me. So we have the opportunity to really start doing this more, living the gospel more than we have before we were stuck at home. But another thing about being stuck at home with sharing the gospel is that there is so much more presence on social media because everyone's at home, or most people are at home, than before. I can tell you, I mean, I'm, like I said, I'm a Facebook fanatic. So I've, even before this happened, I was on all the time, but I have seen a real uptick in people engaging on Facebook. And so right now, while we have everyone's attention, is the perfect time to be sharing the gospel online. For example, I saw many people advertising the general conference from last weekend beforehand. And I was one of those that did it. Every day I would go on with a reminder. We've got general conference coming up. For those of you who've never checked it out, check it out. And then at general conference, which was absolutely amazing, the prophet asked us to fast yesterday on Good Friday, and he asked for a worldwide interfaith fast. So again, we had an opportunity to go out there and share the heck out of that thing. I don't know how many people participated. I hope we had millions and millions and millions of members and non-members alike, because I believe in miracles. We have a God of miracles, and I just hope that we see a lot of miracles in the coming days as a result of that fast. But even when those things aren't going on, we can always share memes, links, articles, invitations. The missionaries are still holding discussions on Zoom meetings. And so we can invite people to learn more about the gospel and to meet with the missionaries. They still do that. We actually had a Zoom meeting with the missionaries with my family the other day, and they challenged us. And so this is a really great time to share the gospel online, and it's much easier to share on social media than it is in person. So let's share the heck out of it while it's super easy for us, people. We don't have to look anybody in the eye. We just have to share, and the right people will find it. All right, so we're doing that. And something else I wanted to mention that I think is pretty interesting. How the Come Follow Me manual for living the gospel. The Come Follow Me manual was obviously inspired for this time period, right? I mean, obviously the Lord knew that we would be at home having church. And so that's one of the reasons why Come Follow Me was created. The other thing that I think is interesting is that the Gospel Doctrine Guide, Come Follow Me version, is in weeks. It's set out week by week, even though when we're at church, we only teach it every other week, and that's always bothered me. I'm always like, am I supposed to teach both weeks, just 1 week? Why is it set out in 2 weeks? Well, guess what? Now I'm teaching it every week. And so if people are staying at home, they're teaching it every week, because it's awfully hard to do Relief Society or priesthood with your family. So a lot of people are teaching it weekly now. And so that all came together for me. I thought that was really something else. And my personal feeling is that China will open up, and now we have a temple announced in Shanghai. I mean, that's amazing. So I believe that the gospel that China will open up to the gospel in the not too distant future, and if even a small percentage decides that they want to be baptized, we can't organize wards and stakes fast enough or build buildings fast enough for them to start meeting in church buildings. But Come Follow Me manuals can be printed up very quickly and cheaply in Mandarin and gotten over to China. And so I believe that's one of the reasons why the Lord did this, because when China opens up, watch out. And also that will be another huge indication of last days, because we know the gospel has to sound in every ear. I think once China opens up, it's just a matter of not very long at all before the second coming. Anyway, that's a little tangent. But so we need to be sharing the gospel and gathering Israel on both sides of the veil. There are plenty of opportunities to go and work on family history right now. You're at home. Let's do it. And then the third thing, and by the way, I don't know about you, but I know that I tend to be this way, and a lot of people tend to be this way, where we just focus on living the gospel. Like, we get really complacent and like, oh, I'm keeping the commandments. I'm going to church. I'm I'm attending the temple. I'm paying my tithing. I'm praying. I'm good, right? I don't really need to worry about sharing the gospel. That's uncomfortable. And protecting religious freedom. Oh, we're good. We're in a country that respects that. So I'm good. I'm just gonna live the gospel. We no longer have that luxury. Again, sharing the gospel, last days, we are being mandated more and more to do this. We cannot ignore this. This is a command. This is not a suggestion. And protecting religious freedoms, well, we have been told this for a very long time. I mean, just, keep going back and you can find articles and talks and everything on this. I believe we are going to see much, much more emphasis on this in the coming years, partly because of what's going on right now. Our churches and our temples are closed. Now, they were closed by the church in anticipation of stay-at-home orders and because they wanted to do the social distance thing and not have people gathering. So that church mandated that, or the church called for that at first. But then, quickly following on that, were these stay-at-home orders that are forbidding churches to meet. So all of a sudden, we have suspension of our religious freedoms, or at least the ability to meet as a congregation. That's huge. That's a huge encroachment on our religious freedoms. So I think most of us are okay with it right now. We don't like it, but we comply with it because we know that it's temporary and that eventually it'll come back, and we're complying because the church asked us to. But the fact that it could go away for this amount of time and in this country tells you that this is not an impossibility anymore. This is not an unlikelihood anymore. This could happen again. So what if the government decided for some reason that this was a necessity and it was going to be permanent? Then what's our obligation? And we do believe in obeying the law. In our 12th article of faith, it says we believe in being subject to kings, presidents, rulers, and magistrates, in obeying, honor, and sustaining the law. That's very true. However, if you go right up to the 11th article of faith, right before it, we claim the privilege of worshiping Almighty God according to the dictates of our own conscience and allowing all men the same privilege. Let them worship how, where, or what they may. This is a privilege. We claim this privilege. So when those two articles of faith are in direct opposition with each other, then what? And what about this little thing called the Constitution? This is the highest law of the land. So when stay-at-home orders directly contravene the Constitution, what then? That's something to think about. Again, like I said, I think most people are okay with complying with it because it's temporary. The stay-at-home orders are not constitutional. They're just not. You can go back and listen to my episode talking about this I put out a few weeks ago. And I got together with another attorney and we talked about it, and they're just obviously not constitutional. But most of us, again, are complying because it's temporary and we want to be safe from the pandemic. But how much longer is this going to go on before we start saying this is not okay, this is not necessary, this is too far, this is going too far, it's going on too long. So we need to start thinking about that. What are we willing to do to protect our religious freedoms? And what's going to become necessary? Well, and one of the ways we find that out is through personal revelation from living the gospel. So we need to be living the gospel so we can have the personal revelation to help us to know what we're supposed to be doing to protect religious freedoms. And some ideas for that are, the church has been telling us for a long time to do, getting out and voting, being able to, being involved in the voting process and in civics in general, attending town councils or town hall meetings when we have them again, writing letters, running for office if we feel like that's our calling, supporting people that are running for office, hosting meetings with people that are running for office in our homes. There are a lot of things we can do to help shape policy and to make our voices heard. Just another side note, President Oaks has talked a lot about protecting religious freedom in the past, partly because he's a lawyer, he used to be a judge. And guess who might be the prophet? It's very possible that it'll be President Oaks. And then could it be that he's going to be the perfect prophet for our times because he's going to be focusing on protecting religious freedoms? Will there be a time when we have to put the Constitution above state laws or federal laws that contravene it? I don't know. But we're going to need personal revelation to tell us that. And that's one of the things that sort of irritated me a lot about the people that are what I call the social distance police. They're just like, just obey, show that you care, show that you want to protect everyone. Okay, I'm obeying because we have the 11th article of faith, or sorry, the 12th article of faith that says that we obey laws, and the church has asked us to do these things. But that doesn't mean I'm going to stop questioning. I'm never going to question something that's obviously unconstitutional. It is not American to sit back and just obey without at least questioning, analyzing, discussing, debating. That's what we do. This is a democratic country. No, it's not a democracy. It's a democratic republic. But that's what you do in a democratic country. That's what the First Amendment's all about. Freedom of speech, freedom of religion, freedom of assembly, freedom to petition the government, freedom of press. All of those things are there together so that we can express ourselves. So, sorry, I get a little heated about that when people are telling me, just obey, just obey. Why are you even questioning? Someone said, you guys become keyboard warriors. You're darn right I'm going to be a keyboard warrior when I see religious freedoms and other freedoms being taken away. That doesn't mean I'm not going to obey, at least not at this time, but I'm not going to stop questioning. So yeah, I will be a keyboard warrior and a podcast warrior, whatever else you want to call it. I got to calm down and get a hold of myself. So anyway, these are the three things that, again, I think we need to be focusing on in the last days. Everything else will kind of come secondary to that. Living the gospel, sharing the gospel, both sides of the veil, and protecting our religious freedoms. If we don't have religious freedom, we can't live the gospel. If we don't have religious freedom, we can't share the gospel. If we're not living the gospel, we don't know what we need to do to protect our religious freedom. If we're not living the gospel, we're not going to be very good at sharing the gospel. These three things all go together, and they have to be done if we want to get through these last days and fulfill whatever callings that we are supposed to be fulfilling during this time period. For example, I mentioned that I felt like I was supposed to do the gospel doctrine class on Facebook Live. I feel like I know my other calling is to do this podcast. I was directed and guided to do this. And so I'm going to keep doing it. I would like to ask a favor of you all that are listening, though. At the very least, I would like you to subscribe to me on YouTube. It's YouTube.com/Annette Talks. And share the podcasts that you like. I would love to hear from you if you have ideas, if you want to disagree with me on something, please do. You can do it on YouTube, or you can do it on Facebook.com/Annette Talks, or at AnnetteTalks.com, or you can send me an email at Annette@AnnetteTalks.com. I want to hear from you. I want your ideas. I want your disagreement. I want your agreement. And if you really want to support me in doing this, because I think this is so important, and I don't know if you know that I'm a single mom with 3 kids at home, and right now I'm homeschooling them, so I'm super busy. But I also teach part-time, and I'm just really busy. I would love to spend more time with this podcast. I have some ideas for some high-tech stuff that I want to do. I have a lot of great ideas of some fun things I want to do. But I need more time to do that, which means I need some more support. So if you really like what I'm doing and you want to help just a little bit, go to patreon.com, patreon.com/Annette Talks. And you can do a one-time donation of $5, $10, $20, whatever. Or you can do a monthly donation of $5, $10, whatever you want to do. I would love that. But at the very least, please go to YouTube and subscribe and start sharing these podcasts. I think it's super important that we have people out there that are willing to say the important things that need to be said, and that we have a platform to do it. And I feel like I'm supposed to be one of those people. So if you value what I'm doing, please help me in any way you can. So again, thank you for listening, and check me out on YouTube. Subscribe, forward, share, everything you can do. Thank you for listening to Annette on Life, Liberty, and Happiness.